Great to be learning with you on a Thursday, Yom Hamishi. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Fascinating daf today. Excuse me. Fascinating daf today. What language do the angels speak and why? Yehud in South Carolina, Nancy in North Carolina, Shandor in the Bronx, Tom in Pennsylvania, John in Maine, Paul in Chicago, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, Peggy in Colorado, Sharon in New Jersey. Skipped on me. Sharon in New Jersey, Paula loves this group, amen. Franco checking in from Trieste, Italy, Karen in Northern California, Bill in mid-Missouri, Frank in California, Renee in Indiana, Jonathan on the outskirts of LA, Marjorie, not in Georgia, traveling now in North Carolina. Welcome, everybody. We are holding by page 33 here in Tractate Sotah, the 18th volume of the Talmud. Generally speaking, the laws of the suspected adulteress. Here in chapter 7, and we're continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 in chapter 7, we're looking at some very interesting material based on the idea that when the suspected adulteress was brought to the temple for the Sotah ritual, this ritual hasn't been conducted in nearly 2,000 years. It's only applicable when the temple is standing. But as part of that ritual, the priest, the Kohen, would adjure her, saying, he's going to give her a warning that if you're guilty and you drink this water, you're going to die. If you're innocent and you drink this water, it will prove your innocence. And she has to acknowledge that she heard the warning, and then say, out loud, I did not drink, right? Take the oath. Saying I did not commit adultery. Take that oath, and then the water evaluates her. So that oath, the warning that's read to her and the oath that she takes, does it have to be done in Hebrew? That's the question asked by the first Mishna of this chapter. And the answer is no. She has to understand what she's being warned about and what she is saying. So if she doesn't speak Hebrew, she should do that in her own language. Based on that aspect of this law, the sages are taking a bunch of digressions on sort of other similar questions when we have rituals that include prayer. Do we have to say when we are tasked by the Torah to say certain words? Do we need to say them in Lashon Kodesh, in the sacred tongue, the holy language, meaning Hebrew? Or does it suffice to say it in our own language that we understand better, for many of us, than Hebrew? Right, that's the questions. That's the general question that we're addressing, and we're looking at a bunch of different cases. In yesterday's class, very valuable in addressing the question of when we say very standard prayers like the Shma that we say every morning and evening, and the Amidah, which in the Talmud is called the prayer, like the basic prayer, also known as the 18 blessings, the Shmona Esrei. That we say morning, afternoon, and evening. Must we say those in Hebrew? And the answer was no, you can say it in your own language, but it is highly preferable to say it in Hebrew if you can. So that's something that's well worth investing in, is spending some time learning how to read Hebrew, learning how to read particularly those prayers, the Shema and the Amidah, and then, continuing your study to the point where you can understand what those Hebrew words are when you're praying them. That will obviously deepen the prayer experience for you. Until then, not a bad idea to do that in English, at least sometimes when you're praying, so that you can really, when you're praying to God, you know what you're saying and you can pray with greater sincerity. But other times, even when our Hebrew skills are not there yet, better to just start mastering the ability to pray in Hebrew, and over time, start matching up, right? The Hebrew skill with the understanding of Hebrew skill, so that we can pray in Hebrew and know what we are saying. That's where we were at the end of yesterday, and we picked this up at the bottom of page 32b. And the Gemara asks, shall we say that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, holds that the entire Torah may be recited in any language, right? When is the Torah recited? Well, every Shabbos morning, we read that week's Torah portion in synagogue, so that is a public reading from the Torah. It's always done in Hebrew. Could it be done in English, a public recital of the Torah? Is Rebbe saying that we can recite the Torah in our own language, in a language other than Lashon Kodesh, other than the sacred language? Shall we say that Rebbe holds that the entire Torah may be recited in any language? As if it should enter your mind to say that the entire Torah may be recited only in Lashon Kodesh, only in Hebrew, and not in any other language. So why do I need that which the merciful one, God, writes in his Torah, and with respect to the Shema prayer, and these words which I command you this day will be upon your heart. So if in fact it is prohibited for one to recite any portion of the Torah in a language other than Hebrew, then prohibiting the recitation of the Shema in a language other than Hebrew would be superfluous. Now, since the Torah specifically requires that the Shema be recited in Hebrew, it must be because the rest of the Torah may be recited in any language. That's a suggestion that the Gemara makes, and then it rejects this suggestion. No, this is not unquestionably so, as the phrase, and these words which I command you on this day will be, these words are necessary in this case because hear, like Shema, hear, listen, right? Listen, O Israel, or hear, O Israel. Hear, H-E-A-R. And since the word hear is also written with respect to the same passage that includes the words, these words will be, what do we learn from this? Had it not said, quote, and these words which I command you this day will be, end quote, it would have been derived from the word hear, H-E-A-R, that Shema may be recited in any language in accordance with the opinion of the majority who disagreed with Rebbe. Therefore, the phrase, and these words which I command you this day will be, is necessary. Now the Gemara asks, shall we say that, shall we say, I just want to say, okay. So shall we say, hold on a second. Okay, the Gemara asks, shall we say that the rabbis hold that the entire Torah may be recited only in Lashon Kodesh and not in any other language, as if it should enter your mind to say that the Torah may be recited in any language, why do I need that which the merciful one writes here? It is permitted, H-E-A-R, it is permitted for one to recite the entire Torah in any language, rendering so if it is permitted for one to recite the entire Torah in any language, it would render the specific requirement with regard to the Shema superfluous. Again, that's a suggestion the Gemara is making, and it rejects this suggestion. The word here, H-E-A-R, in this passage is necessary in any case because, quote, and these words which I command you this day will be, is also written. Had it not been for the word here, the rabbis would have understood that it is prohibited to recite Shema in any other language, in accordance with the opinion of Rebbe. Therefore, the word here is necessary. In other words, what they're discussing is, since it says with respect to the Shema, both of these seeming, that these words which are included are specifying, since it says about the Shema, hear, O Israel, so you have to hear it and understand it. From these words will be, So, which we derived yesterday, that's from there they learn out that you have to say, if you say it in translation, okay, you're going to understand it better. This is possible to how it's written in Hebrew, even when you translate it. Now, they're challenging that and say, well, if we're saying that with respect to the Shema, maybe, and the Gemara rejected both of those. Now, it is stated in the Mishna, our Mishnah, now we're moving on away from the Shema to discuss the Amidah, the prayer, right? The praise and thank and beseech God, according to the script that the sages laid out. It's the most basic prayer that we have. It's not the shortest prayer, but it's the most fundamental prayer. So, it is stated in the Mishnah that the Amidah, the prayer, is a request for divine mercy. One may pray in any way that one desires, right? And the sages told us elsewhere in the Talmud that a prayer that is only on the script and doesn't include personal words of praise and petition is not a proper prayer. You have to. So the Gemara asks, but may prayer really be recited in any language? But didn't Rav Yehuda say a person should never request in the Aramaic language that his needs be met? Right? So their challenge isn't to say that you can't pray in any language. The challenge is against the idea that you can pray in. Why would that be? Now, Aramaic in the ancient world, the time of the Talmud, that was to the sages what English is to us. Right? Aramaic was the language they spoke every day in the marketplace, in business, just going about their day. They spoke Aramaic. The Talmud, the Mishna is written, that it's recorded in Aramaic. So they're saying that this language that we're discussing, that the Gemara is written in, is a language that you cannot use for praying, according to Rav Yehuda. Are we to learn out from that, if English is the most common language in our lives? But as you'll see, no, there's a distinction. It's not just that you should, they're not saying that you shouldn't use the vernacular that you use every day in order to pray. What they're saying is that Aramaic poses a particular problem. Why? Because Aramaic is just kind of a commonized, I don't know how else to put it, but a secular, commonplace version of Hebrew. Many of the words are the same, but not the same. They're changed in a lot of different ways. Usually a person who's a fluent Hebrew speaker can make his way to Hebrew. As we'll see, Aramaic tends to sound, let's say in the ears of God or in the ears of the angels, like a distorted version of Hebrew. Now, why did they use Aramaic every day, a language that was so similar to but different from the tongue, right? The holy tongue. So they saved the holy tongue for holy matters, but in the marketplace and about all the, the mundane and often, unholy, let's say, matters that come up in people's lives, they're not holy. And perhaps that's why they would prefer that you not pray in Aramaic, since it's purposely made to be unholy alongside of Hebrew. Right? It is stated in the Mishnah that the Amidah, but may prayer really be recited in any language? But didn't Rav Yehuda say a person should never request in the Aramaic language that his needs be met? As Rabbi Yochanan said, angels do not attend to him, as the ministering angels are not familiar. The Hebrew for that is makirin, or maybe it's the Aramaic, but the ministering angels are not familiar with the Aramaic language. Now that's a pretty chutzpahdik thing for our sages to be saying. The angels are not familiar with Aramaic, but they're familiar with every other language, but not with Aramaic, or they're familiar with Hebrew, but they can't figure out Aramaic. What are they saying? So the Gemara answers, this is not difficult, as that statement of Rabbi Yochanan is referring to the prayer of an individual who needs the support of the angels, whereas this statement of the Mishnah is referring to communal prayer. Now, before we go on to that discussion, let me just read to you a couple things. On the question of can you pray in Aramaic, Some say that even in a situation where an individual can ask for his needs in any language, he should not do so in Aramaic. That is the halacha. It's not everyone agrees, but some say. And with respect to this question in synagogue, about that question, Rav Steinsaltz says, the commentaries interpret this statement in various ways. This idea that the entire Torah may be recited in any language. All agree that the Torah was originally stated and written in Hebrew. Yes, dear?
Sorry, I just want to let you know it's really glitching out both on Facebook and YouTube. Everybody's got a lot of freezing and stuff. So it's like you'll talk and then it'll go out for a couple seconds and then you'll come so.
Nina's telling me that it is glitching. Hold on.
Not sure what you can do.
It seems to be glitching on Facebook and YouTube. Everyone is saying that, huh? Yes, lots. Okay, that's odd. Well, I could reconnect it, but that's always then we're doing a restart. Has it gotten any better? Now, there's always a 12-second delay, but has it gotten any better in terms of this glitching? And I'll wait to hear people address this question. Has it gotten better? It's strange because my transmitter, so to speak, is showing that everything is normal. Tom says it goes in and out. Jonathan says it's better now. Yes, they were coming every few seconds. Now it seems to be better. Anybody else? Is it getting better now? I'm going to count to 20 and let me know if the counting is smooth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Paula says appears stable. John says good. Janice says yes, better. Bella says yes, better. I think we're okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for being patient. Okay. All right. Okay, so where was I? Okay. Yeah, everyone says it's great. Okay, all right. So we'll do the best that we can. So, where am I? So with regard to whether the Torah should be read in Hebrew or not, all agree that the Torah was given in Hebrew, right? So the 10 Commandments were uttered in Hebrew. The Torah itself was given in Hebrew. It was never translated into Hebrew. God gave the Torah in Hebrew. However, the Gemara at Shabbat 88b, Tractate 80, Shabbat 88b, says that when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, it was also heard in all 70 languages, right? So God sort of like, you've seen in movies at the UN, when somebody is speaking at the UN, all the ambassadors from around the world have their headphones on and everybody hears it in their own language. So when the 10 Commandments were given, when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, people heard it in every language that existed, right? Who needed to hear it? Weren't only the children of Israel present at Mount Sinai? Not necessarily. Because, first of all, we know that there was a certain number of Egyptians who came out and went with them, and maybe they didn't speak Hebrew. And we have a midrash elsewhere that when God was preparing to give the Torah to the Jewish people, he first went around to the other nations and offered it to them. And they all said, no, we don't want to be bound. It's not for us. Oh, what is going on? Now I am seeing a streaming issue. Now it's gone. How odd. Nina, if you can hear me, could you make sure that nothing is going with the internet in the house? Like, you should only have one stream going on your computer, and, Avi isn't watching a movie or something like that. Like, we're not taxing the internet too much. All right, just letting Nina look into that a little bit. Ay, what a hassle. We're really covering fascinating material. This is not the time to be glitching. Gremlins, says Bill. Exactly. Okay. And Glenn over here, you don't have the internet going, right?
I just turned it off.
Okay, thank you. All right. And, all right, Nina, if you can hear me, just make sure we're not streaming anything else in the house at the same time. All right. Connection seems to be more stable now. Okay, very good. Here we go. Let's try to keep going. So all the other nations were offered the Torah, but they rejected it. They said, no, this is not for us. Now, I heard from Rabbi Rubin here in LA that, the majority of those nations said, no, this is not for us. But there were individuals within those nations that said, yes, I would like to be part of the nation that is bound by the Torah. And those people, at least some of them, made their way to Mount Sinai. And just as, we, all the Jewish people, all of our souls were present, not just the children of Israel who were alive in that generation, but all Jews throughout time, our souls were present at Mount Sinai when the Torah was given. And likewise, non-Jewish souls were there as well. Which ones? The ones who over time would become converts to Judaism. Right? I wasn't familiar with that teaching, but they were definitely, but according to Rabbi Rubin, right, the non-Jewish souls who would eventually become Jewish souls, they were present at Mount Sinai as well. And for all I know, maybe non-Jewish souls who would become interested in the Torah and deepening their own connection to God through Torah, even if they're not Jewish, perhaps they were there as well. That I don't know. That's me speculating. But that non-Jews who would eventually become Jews were present at Mount Sinai, that I got from Rabbi Rubin, who's quite a Hasidic Rebbe. Okay. So, where am I? So that's with respect to the idea that the Torah was given in Hebrew, heard in every language. Now, citing Rav Chai Gaon, the early commentaries state that this dispute, whether the Torah can be read in a language other than Hebrew, that this dispute in the Gemara is with regard to whether the Torah was given to Moses in the other language besides Hebrew with a specific text. Meaning that at the same time that it was given in Hebrew, it was given in translation of other languages, or were the translations later? And Rabbeinu Hananel explains that the issue is whether or not a Torah scroll may be written in another language and still maintain its sanctity as a Torah scroll. Now that we don't do, right? You won't see a Sefer Torah, meaning a Torah scroll written on parchment and wrapped around two dowels, right? A traditional Torah scroll is always written in Hebrew and not written in any other language. Of course, you find the text of the Torah translated into every language on earth, right? The Bible is translated into every language on earth, but those are books, right? And so they possess some measure of sanctity as books, but not the same kind of sanctity as a perfectly written Torah scroll, which is written by a scribe, by a sofer, according to many, many laws and requirements that a Torah scroll needs to adhere to. That is not done in any language other than Hebrew. Rashi explains that the question is whether or not the Torah may be read publicly in the synagogue in a language other than Hebrew. Tosafos Harash object to this explanation, claiming that since the public Torah reading is a rabbinic ordinance, one cannot say that it must be performed in Hebrew. Rashi's explanation is defended in Beersheba, where it is explained that according to Rashi, the question is whether one who reads or studies the Torah in another language fulfills the commandment of studying Torah, which is a mitzvah by Torah law. Tosafos Arash, as well as Tosafos in Tractate Brachos 13b, explain that the Gemara is referring not to the rabbinic mitzvah of reading the Torah aloud in synagogue, but to those specific passages of the Torah that are required to be read by Torah law. The Meiri explains that the debate concerns whether or not the Torah was given for the purpose of being studied in any language. So there's a lot of debate about what exactly is the question we're asking when we ask, may the Torah be read in any language or be recited in any language, or must it only be recited in Hebrew? It's a wider discussion than we're going to get into today. For now, suffice it to say that when the Torah portion of the week is recited in a synagogue, that is done in Hebrew. But when you're learning Torah, you can certainly learn a language that is not Hebrew so that you're actually learning, right? I mean, until you know Hebrew, it'd be much better if you could learn Torah in Hebrew. But until you learn Hebrew, better that you should be learning Torah than not learning at all because you don't speak the language. Now, the Gemara asks, and are the ministering angels not familiar with the Aramaic language? I mean, the ministering angels, not just the angels, but the ministering angels, the very high, up high angels, right? There's there's a hierarchy of angels, and these are the highest angels. You're telling me that they don't understand Aramaic? Asks the Gemara. But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, Tosefta 13:5? Yochanan the high priest heard a divine voice emerging from the house of the Holy of Holies, right? So either the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, when it was the tabernacle in the wilderness, the first 400 years in the Promised Land, or from the Holy of Holies in the first temple or in the second temple, right? In the first temple where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, in the second temple where the Ark of the Covenant was no longer kept because it disappeared, but where the high priest in all cases entered, right? The Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could enter on Yom Kippur. That place inside, right? So Yochanan, the high priest, heard a divine voice emerging from the house of the Holy of Holies, and it was saying, the youth who went to wage war in Antiochia have been victorious. And there was another incident involving Shimon HaTzadik, who heard a divine voice emerging from the house of the Holy of Holies that was saying the decree that the enemy intended to bring against the temple is annulled, and Gaskalgas, which is the name in the Talmud for the Roman Emperor Caligula, has been killed, and his decrees have been voided. And people wrote down that time that the divine voice was heard, and later found that it matched exactly the moment that Caligula was killed. And the Gemara concludes, and this divine voice was speaking in Aramaic, right? So if angels don't understand Aramaic, how is it possible that some kind of angelic voice that was heard by the high priest in the emerging from the Holy of Holies, he wasn't in there, but emerged from the Holy of Holies into the sanctuary, that part of the temple where the priests could enter during the year. And they heard this divine voice sort of transmit a message, right, before CNN, where they couldn't get international news any other way. And on these occasions, there was an angelic voice who told them, good news, this emperor who passed a bunch of decrees against the Jews has been killed in Rome, and so those decrees here won't be enforced. And when that news was delivered, it was delivered in Aramaic. So the Gemara answers, well, if you wish, say that the divine voice is different, as its purpose is to communicate a message, and therefore it also communicates in Aramaic. Or, if you wish, say instead that it was the angel Gabriel. As the master said with regard to Joseph, Gabriel came and taught him 70 languages, as he knows all of the languages, as opposed to the other angels who do not. So maybe it's not a universal skill among the angels to know all the languages of humans. It's a skill that only some of the angels possess. What does Rav Steinsaltz say about this? That the ministering angels are not familiar with Aramaic. What is going on? So there are several interpretations of this statement. Tosafos in Tractate Shabbat 12a ask, how could it be said that angels do not understand Aramaic? As if the angels know people's thoughts, then they must understand every language. And they answer that the meaning of the word makirin are not familiar with, is that the word makirin is not to be familiar with, but rather to value and honor. It's not that the angels don't understand Aramaic. It's that they don't like Aramaic. They devalue Aramaic. There's something wrong with Aramaic, as I mentioned before. The statement therefore means that although the ministering angels understand Aramaic, it is not regarded highly by them. And some commentaries cite Rabbeinu Tam as the source of this interpretation. Others explain that the angels' lack of regard for Aramaic is due to its similarity to Hebrew. It is consequently viewed as a distortion of the Hebrew language. But several challenges are raised against this interpretation. The Sfas Emes explains that according to the Zohar, the angels do not understand all the thoughts of people. They understand only those thoughts that are revealed to them. It's not that the angels understand God knows all our thoughts. Does God let the angels in on our thoughts? When God chooses to do so, the angels are privy to our thoughts, and when God does not choose to let them be privy to our thoughts, they are not, according to the Sfas Emes. Maharsha cites an opinion that the angels do not understand any language other than Hebrew, and that Rabbi Yochanan mentions Aramaic in particular to teach that even Aramaic, which is very similar to Hebrew, and which is the language in which parts of the Torah and books of the Bible are written, is nevertheless incomprehensible to the angels, right? So, according to one opinion, the angels speak all the language, they just don't like Aramaic. According to another interpretation, the angels speak only Hebrew. And this is one of those areas where the sages have various traditions, and different sages adhere to different traditions. And the question was never answered flat out, this is what we all believe, right? So these kinds of esoteric questions, usually we don't arrive at a final definitive answer. It is stated in our Mishnah, we're moving on from whether we recite the prayer, the Amidah, in Hebrew or not. Answer is you can say it in your own language, but better to learn the Hebrew. Now, what about the grace after meals, the Birkat Hamazon? This may be recited in any language, like the Shma and the Amidah. When you bless God after you have eaten and you're satisfied, as the Torah commands us to do, you shall bless the Lord after you are sated and satisfied with your meal. And you should do that in a language you understand. It is permitted to do this not in Hebrew, although Hebrew is better. Again, same idea. So it is stated in the Mishnah that grace after meals may be recited in any language. As it is written, and you shall eat and be satisfied and bless the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 8:10. And the word bless here is homiletically interpreted to mean in any language that you bless. So when you bless God, when you bless your family, when you bless others, you would do that in a language they understand, and likewise with the Birkat Hamazon. It is stated in the Mishnah that an oath of testimony may be said in any language as it is written, and if anyone sins in that he heard the voice of adjuration, and the emphasis on hearing in the verse is interpreted to mean that it can be recited in any language that a person hears, i.e. understands, right? So when we enter into legal contracts with other people, we should understand the contract that we're getting into. And when we testify in court, we should understand that which we're testifying, and therefore we can do those things in our own language. It is stated in the Mishnah that an oath on a deposit may be taken in any language, and this is derived by means of a verbal analogy from the word sins, Leviticus 5:21, that appears in the portion of an oath on a deposit, and the word sins, Leviticus 5:1, that is mentioned in the portion of an oath of testimony. It is stated in the Mishnah, and these are recited only in the sacred time. Okay, so those are the ones that can be said in any language. Now let's go to the recitals that the Torah commands us to recite in certain situations, which must be said in Hebrew. Now you don't have that choice. These things must be said in Hebrew. And these are recited only in the sacred tongue. The recitation of the verses that one recounts when bringing the first fruits to the temple. And the ceremony of halitza, which ends the bond between a widow and her brother-in-law when her husband died childless. This is said in Hebrew. How is it derived that the recitation when bringing the first fruits must be said in Hebrew? When the Torah discusses this mitzvah, it states, and you shall speak and say before the Lord your God. And below, in the discussion of the blessings and curses that were spoken when the children of Israel were entering the promised land near the Jordan River, and the oaths and the blessings and curses were read to the whole population by the priests and the Levites, and the people said, Amen. That had to be done in Hebrew, as we heard in the Mishnah. And from that, we derive that things that are recited from the Torah for people to answer Amen, that has to be done in Hebrew. And the Gemara asks, from where do we derive that the Levites themselves answered in Hebrew? And the Gemara answers, it is derived from the verbal analogy between the word voice that appears here in the portion of the blessings and curses and the word voice in the verse that relates to Moses. It is written here with a loud voice, and it is written there, Moses spoke and God answered him by a voice. And just as there, the Ten Commandments were stated in the sacred tongue, the Ten Commandments were given in Hebrew, so too here the Levites spoke in the sacred tongue. It is stated in the Mishnah. How is it derived that the recitation of a halitza ceremony must be in Hebrew? The verse states about the Yavama, right? The widow whose husband died childless. And then her brother-in-law, right? Her husband's surviving brother chooses not to marry her. They choose not to marry each other. So they perform the halitza ceremony. And about this, the Torah says, Deuteronomy 25:9. And she shall speak and say, so shall it be done to the man that doth not build up his brother's house. Rabbi Yehuda derives this law from the phrase, and she shall speak and say, so. And the Gemara asks, and what do the rabbis do with, in other words, how do they interpret this word so? They require it to teach that any matter detailed in the portion that is an action is indispensable to the halitza ceremony. As the verse states, so shall it be done. However, the other aspects of the ritual, for example, the recitations, are not indispensable, and in their absence, the ritual is valid after the fact. You should say them, but if you don't, it's still a valid ritual. And Rabbi Yehuda derives this law from the fact that the verse could have used a shorter form of the word so, and that word in Hebrew is ka, and instead uses the longer form for this word, kacha, and he therefore derives both laws from this word. And the rabbis do not learn anything from the difference between ko and kacha. Okay. I see somebody said their screen is frozen. You might want to maybe rewind just a little bit back so your computer can buffer a little bit better. Because from my end, it's showing that I am broadcasting a clean signal. I'm not sure what's going on today. Maybe it's just sunspots. One of those days. I'm just going to keep going. So now we're on 33b. And the Gemara asks, and what does Rabbi Yehuda do with this verse? And she shall speak and say, from which the rabbis derive that the recitation at the halitza ritual must be in Hebrew. And the Gemara answers, he requires it in order to teach with regard to the Levites that they spoke in the sacred tongue, whereas the that the halitza ritual is performed by Levites. Rabbi Yehuda derives that the Levites spoke in Hebrew due to this same verbal analogy, and the halitza serving as a source. It's so frustrating. I got the warning that internet is slow, but now it's back. It's frustrating because we pay a lot of money to have crazy fast. I don't know what to say. I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so the Gemara asks, but let Rabbi Yehuda derive that the Levites spoke in Hebrew from a verbal analogy between the word voice that is written with regard to the Levites and the word voice in the verse about Moses. And the Gemara answers, he learned the verbal analogy between from his teacher, and he did not learn the verbal analogy. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'm just going to skip that particular derivation. They're deriving why we read things like the halitza ceremony in Hebrew. Now, it is stated in the Mishnah, how did the ceremony of blessings and curses take place? When the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River, I can see that it's glitching. So frustrated. Paula says, definitely some spots are gremlins. All right. Okay. All right. It seems to be wanting to come. All right, listen. I keep fighting it. We're near the end of this daf. They derive how the blessings and the curses were spoken, and you know, Rabbi. I'm just going to skip to the end of the page, where I'm going to knock off for today, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov did not come to establish the location of Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Rather, it comes to show the Jewish people the way second time when they were entering the land of Canaan, like the way that he showed them the first time when they left Egypt and a pillar of cloud went before them and made the terrain easier to transverse. And the purpose of the verse is to instruct the Jewish people how to enter the land of Canaan with relative ease, despite the pillar of cloud. The word way instructs them to go along a pre-established way, not in fields and vineyards. And the phrase that dwell instructs them to go in settled areas and not in the wilderness. In the Araba, which means plain, teaches them to go in the plains and not over mountains and hills. Enough. Okay. God willing, we'll be better off tomorrow. Let me see if we've got some questions or comments, and hopefully the signal will be clean enough to get those there. Sharon, every Kaddish is Aramaic. How do they square that with this Mishnah? Very good. Sharon is pointing out that when we say Kaddish, I'm saying Kaddish many times every day because I'm in the year of saying Kaddish for my mom. The Kaddish prayer, the basic prayer that we hear at every funeral and prayer service, is in Hebrew. What we say, magnified, Yiskadal v'Yiskadash Shemei Rabbah, magnified and sanctified be the name of the Lord, etc. That prayer is in Aramaic. Well, God certainly understands it, even if the angels either don't understand or that Aramaic is somehow bad. It's just better to pray in Hebrew or in a language that is not Aramaic. That's what we. If nothing is random or coincidental in reality, these strange glitches must have some divine reason for occurring when they do. Amen. That's exactly right. Ifa is a woman of faith, reminding us we should never get annoyed. Right? We learn that elsewhere. Anger is a lack of faith. Anger is a lack of emunah. So, when things go wrong in the world, now there is sort of righteous anger in the sense that, I see suffering. I believe I'm in a position where I can stop that suffering. I'm going to jump in and help that person and stop their suffering. Right? It doesn't mean that we just accept everything and sit on our butts. But what we don't do is get so angry and annoyed that we can't see straight. Rather, like I suggest, you think, why is it today? What are all these gremlins that get glitches today? I don't know, but I'll keep thinking about it. Bill, well, and it's also worth remembering, putting aside all the souls who had to be there at the giving of the Torah at Sinai, perhaps we can take a further spiritual teaching. The Torah was given in all languages because, although only Jews are bound by its laws, lessons and truths are a gift for all humankind. Amen. And it is not true that only the Jews are bound by its laws. Only Jews are bound by the 613 commandments. But there are 7 commandments, which are known as the Noahide commandments. As we've said many times, they're not just 7 laws. They're 7 categories of law, whole big categories. That bind everybody, right? Those are the 7 laws that bind all human beings. and starting with to know God, K-N-O-W, right? So the idea of reading the Torah and learning in order to deepen one's relationship with the Creator, that is a commandment that is incumbent on all humans. And thank God we are all fulfilling that commandment right now together by learning together. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together tomorrow, and God willing, glitch free at our regular Friday time, noon Pacific.